A very big welcome once again to this first World Athletics webinar of the year with the theme On the 2022 Start Line. It's obviously mid-February. Some of us might have been on the start line already, but wonderful to bring everybody together on this World Athletics start line in partnership with Mass Participation World. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Robb. I'm the founder and CEO of Mass Participation World. Delighted to be your host tonight. We have a wonderful program. Some amazing speakers literally spanning the globe from early in the morning on the East Coast US and Canada, going right across to myself in Indonesia and lots in between. I mentioned just a little bit of housekeeping before we get formally underway. Say hello in the chat if you haven't already. During the course of the webinar, please pop your questions in either the Q&A or the chat. We'll be monitoring those here in the studio, and we'll be trying to weave as many of those questions as possible into the chat. If we can't get to them during the course of the show, we'll do our best to get back to you afterwards. As I mentioned, for those of you that have just joined us, we have over 300 people registered from 71 countries, which we are absolutely delighted with, and World Athletics is delighted with. Really fantastic. We are live streaming on Facebook on the Mass Participation World Facebook page. We are recording, and the recording will be available on the MPW Academy, and I'll ask Oscar just to pop the link where you can register to access that recording from as well on MPW Academy and also on the Facebook page. We are also delighted that once again, courtesy of Julia Kui and her team from CGX, we are live streaming into China tonight, which is absolutely fantastic. And a couple of other quick things. The next MPW web series will be on the 31st of March, and that will be talking about Web 3.3 and the metaverse and what impact that may be having on our industry. The road ahead, as always, we'll be giving you updates from tomorrow every Friday. If you don't subscribe to that, that's our weekly newsletter. And many of you have been contributing to and submitting to and using our COVID study. The number that we put out this week, over 8 million participants from 36 countries, only 5 recorded COVID cases. And if you've recently had events, please, we'll put the link in there as well. Give us those details, and we'll put that data out to help as many people as possible. But now, most importantly, on to tonight's program, and we got an amazing and a stacked program. Our first session, which will get underway once I finish the introductions, will be a panel: Runners' Representation and Self-Representation on Social Media, Learnings for Race Organizers. And I'll introduce that panel very shortly as we come on to that. That will then be followed by a session that I'm really looking forward to, and it's going to be fascinating: Runners, or How to Derive Pleasure in Times of Pain and Bodily Distress. We are going to be joined by Dr. Asaf Lev, who's the sports and exercise anthropologist, senior lecturer at Ono Academic College in Israel. He'll be in conversation with Alessio Punzi. I think that's going to be a fantastic and fascinating one. Then a very short segment that wasn't on the initial program, but it's going to be some great insights and information from Dr. Paolo Adami, who's the medical manager, health and science department on World Athletics, giving some updates in terms of some race emergency medical training courses. We'll then go into a World Athletics update session on a number of different areas: world rankings, rule refreshers, and course measurement. And we've got a number of people that will be contributing to that. Carlo De Angeli, Andres Sabo, and Bernie Conway will be joining us from Canada. And then we move on to assessing 2021 and planning for 2022. Brett Clothier is going to be joining us. He's the head of the Athletics Integrity Unit, with some insights from last year and going forward into this year. And then an old friend of these webinars who we see very regularly, be delighted to be welcoming Mark Hurst, who's the bidding manager for World Athletics, and he'll be giving a quick update on the bidding calendar for World Athletics events that will be released during the course of this year. And then a big wrap up and goodbye. We've got about a 2-hour session. I'll be coming back to wrap it up. You'll be seeing plenty of me during the course of it, and I'll be kind of sitting in the wings for the next and the first session, moderating. But we've got such an amazing panel here that I think it's going to be very conversational. I'm not certain that I'm going to be able to get a word in edgeways if the practice sessions have been anything to go by. Delighted to welcome our first segment and session. We've got a fantastic panel. and we're going to see them on camera now, and I'm going to start by introducing Dr. Nur Kurtoglu-Houghton, who's joining us from Birmingham in the UK. Hello there, Nur. Nice to see you.
Hello everyone.
Wonderful to see you. Nur is a lecturer of English language at Aston University in the UK and author of Language Identity, Online and Running, which was published in 2021 with Macmillan. I'm sure we're going to hear some great insights. We have Michelle Sammet, who is the Stakeholder Communications Manager from World Athletics, joining us from Germany. Hi there, Michelle.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to see you again. Thanks for joining us. We have Marlene Vinkrenings, who's the marketing manager, Global Sports Communication, joining us from Holland or the Netherlands, depending on how you'd like to name it. Hello there, Marlene.
Hi. Thanks for the introduction. I believe people will listen to both.
Wonderful. Thank you. And joining us from Boston, Chris Lotzburn. Hello, Chris. Good morning. Early morning for you in Boston.
Good morning, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful to see you. Thanks for making the time. Chris is the communications and media manager from the Boston Athletics Association, who obviously deliver the Boston Marathon. And so let's get underway with this nearly 45-minute session, nearly 50-minute session that we have. I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation. And we're going to throw over to you, start for the first 5 or 6 minutes, Nur, to share the insights from the research that you've been done. And then we're going to get in a conversation around a broad range of topics, a broad range of questions, picking up on your research and insights from the other panelists. But over to you for the time being.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. And thank you, Alessio, as well, for inviting me to this webinar. Very exciting. I'm very excited. Right. So my work with runners and runners' representation online is more to do with runner self-representation on social media. And I looked at what runners share on social media, how they interact with their followers as they share their posts, how they do this linguistically, and the relational strategies that they use. I also looked at the cultural practices of the running community as they shared their posts online, their lived experiences. Now, my work involves social media around Facebook and Instagram, and today I want to focus more on my findings to do with the Insta running community. As you know, Instagram affords users with about 300 words per caption. So this means that runners, when they post, they can actually share details about their running, about their training, about anything that they want to share with their followers. When they write, they want to build relationships. They want to bond with others. They want to contribute to the running community, and they establish and build engagement, and they build communication. I won't have time to discuss all my findings and share all my findings, but there are two main points that have come out from my research. One of them is to do with the community aspect of running and the running communities. So runners want to affiliate with others as they share and discuss what mutually interests them. So there's a lot of group commitment, there's a lot of group spirit, there's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of talking about, for example, as Instagram, IG family. So looking at it as family, the team, my team, the team, my village even, or this community. So talking about the Insta running community. And runners share their running stories, their running ventures, the details of their training, whether it's gone well or not so well. And they reflect on the events. So if they've participated in a race, for example, then afterwards they reflect on the race, they reflect on their performance, they reflect on the event itself, the organization of that race as well. So that's one of the things about the community aspect. The other thing is about accountability, and this is actually a very, very important part of my findings. And how do runners have accountability online? Well, I found that there is mainly via two ways. One of them is using persuasive discourse. So they want to motivate, they want to inspire others, they want to empower others. And they use hashtags like run to inspire or motivate yourself to run. And often when they do this, they actually give self-initiated advice. And when they do this, they also often use self-criticism to invite others to action. So, for example, they might say things like, excuses get you nowhere. Don't just talk about it, do it. I'm often guilty of this as much as anybody. And then they would give examples of their of what they've done in their trainings, and then they say, it hurt, but I did it. Okay, so it's like inviting people to action and initially using self-criticism. And then another example could be this one, where, for example, one of the research participants in my study said, about volunteering. So the old me only cared about running. Okay, not volunteered once. I always had an excuse ready. Oh, I will do it one day. I will go and volunteer in an event. And then came the stress fracture, and then it made me reassess everything. It made me stop and think how much I have been take. What did it even take to even participate and volunteer? I had no idea. How can you love something so much and not ever be on the other side? So I have been putting that right. I have been volunteering. So don't wait until you're injured to find out, like I did. I will make sure I get the balance correct in the future. You will love it, I promise. So you can see the power of these words. Here we see the person is criticizing, and then saying, don't wait, don't do what I did, and don't wait like I did, and then inviting them to action. And so these kinds of the accountability, they encourage others to do the same. That they invite sharing of resonances. They invite get others to get it done. Other ways. So apart from the sharing persuasive discourse, they also use what is called on Instagram as honesty posts. So they have this hashtag called Keep It Real. So and using Keep It Real, they are actually a voice for the running community. They empower the others. They talk about societal matters, for example, any stigmas surrounding obesity or mental health. So they challenge those stigmas. They drive change in society. And how do they do this? They do this by foregrounding their posts by, for example, I'll be honest, or it's no secret that I suffer from mental health. And then they will share their experience, or not looking for sympathy. I simply want to share today that, and then they will say what it is. Or I have shared quite openly how I struggle with, and then they would actually to share that. So I just wanted to maybe not so just to say that, for example, a participant who actually themselves are a representation for large sizes, and the importance of the size does not matter, but that they're actually a voice for the group who may consider themselves as larger than some others. So mentally, this person wrote and said, mentally I'm feeling stronger. So if I'm completely honest, I almost didn't share a transformation picture today. Mentally I'm feeling stronger. Okay, physically I'm currently weak. I'm proud to be a voice for larger people wanting to get out there and have a go. I take solace in knowing that I keep it real and share the good and bad days. This is as real as it gets. Transformation is so much than pouty faces or Snapchat filters. Seriously, that's a fraudulent transformation. It's not real. Transformations are about finding that strength within you to keep going after you've faced adversity. The decision to keep going, no matter how long it takes, having the courage to accept you need to change, and being so honest with yourself. That's liberating. Don't give up. Don't compare yourself. Do it your way. And this brings me to my last point at the moment. It's the you do you hashtag, which is used a lot in the Instagram running community. So I'll leave it at that for now. if anybody would like to take over from any of the points that I have made.
Call this, the theme of authenticity, whether that be, from an event perspective, from an individual perspective, elite or recreational runners. And maybe why don't we pick up on the you spoke about fake and authenticity. Let's throw that. Who would like to take that further in terms of what they see, and maybe do you want to pick that one up there, Chris, from a Boston perspective, maybe?
Sure. Yeah. From our perspective, really around each of our events. We ask athletes, volunteers for their own stories. We know, similar to what Nur said, folks may be sharing their stories on their own platforms, but we have an even bigger platform to showcase maybe the challenges they've overcome, or why Boston, or why reaching the starting line even is very important to them. So one tactic that we've found works really well is in our athlete communications, asking for their stories, asking for their photos, asking them to share why this event or why running means something to them. And we've created runner spotlights, qualifier spotlights, volunteer spotlights on our social channels that really have great engagement rates, because they are authentic and they are engaging, and folks can relate to maybe the challenges they've overcome, or what the event means to them. And not just on social too, it kind of creates this broader platform that we've seen it overlaps into the media spectrum. Maybe news outlets will see a really compelling story from social and say, oh, this is a great thing that we want to pick up on. Can we do a bigger story on an athlete overcoming a challenge, or why someone comes back to our race year after year after year. So for us, for us, really broadening the individual platform, giving them a space to showcase why the sport is meaningful to them, or what they've overcome. We've found great success in that, and it really speaks to that authenticity and inspiring, motivating. What you spoke about, Nur, it's kind of core to our event and our mission to inspire and get folks active.
Let's maybe take that then more from an elite perspective, Marlene, with the stable of athletes that you work with. How does that authenticity work in with them? We spoke a little bit about, sometimes they're in this position where there's the individual, but there's also their relationships with the brands that they have. There's the athlete on the track or on the road racing. There's the backstory and the personal life and how much they expose. And I guess that relates as much to an elite as it is to recreational runners. But just some insights of yours in terms of, again, coming back to the theme, how might this be valuable for race organizers that are listening in terms of how they build engagement with the participants in their event?
I think authenticity is one of the main topics for a lot of athletes on social media. I think people look at each other, so they see a lot in terms of influencers, how they build following. While we've seen with most of our athletes that telling their own story is the most important thing. You have to stay really close to yourself, because when you're framing something or you're building an image that's too far from who you are, there is a point where it doesn't work anymore, because then it takes too much energy to keep up a certain appearance. While elite athletes are human beings, so they struggle with the same struggles as Noor was referring to it. They have the same struggles. They have the same mental struggles. They have the same physical struggles. They get injured. They have training sessions where it doesn't go well. They have training sessions where it's absolutely amazing, and they believe they can be the next Olympic champion. And all those emotions are there as well. So I think most important is to stay very close to yourself and spread that word, because that's most sustainable. In terms of what Chris was saying with Boston Marathon, what we've seen, and this is one of the reasons why we started the NN running team, is that our African athletes didn't really have a voice on social media. It was not common to them to present themselves on social media. While the great thing was when we started to tell their stories, we felt so much engagement and connection with runners around the world that it was really quickly picked up that, someone running in the US, in Europe, in Australia, in China, they were really interested in the stories behind success of our athletes, because crossing the finish line is not a story. I think there's so much more behind, getting to the start line, all the training sessions, what their focus is, how they keep disciplined, all those things. And I believe in general in elite sport, that's what fans want to hear. That's what they be inspired. That's why they go running themselves. That's why they go the extra mile. And I think that's what social media should be about, to bring inspiration. And in terms of the link to the race organizers, I think social media is about being social. So finding the connection between the amateur runner who is training in his village a couple of times a week, linking that to the elite athlete who's training twice a day, towards the organization, towards all the inspirational stories. I believe the elite races, the races could be this community, could be this hub where everything comes together and where people can find their community to have a shared goal.
Just quickly jumping in on the subject there, on the subject of authenticity, I think one of the big things that Marlene's rightly pointed out there is the stories, because one of the big problems that our sport has, if you were, is that everything's built around numbers. How fast do you run, or how far do you throw, or whatever. But the problem is that the human brain actually can't remember numbers. So unless it's a big milestone, a sub-2 or whatever the conversation is about, it's very hard for anyone to relate to. So the best thing for athletes to do, or for race organizers to do, is to attach a story to a performance and make that relatable. And if I, as Marlene rightly said, if I as a mass participation runner experience exactly the same kind of ups and downs as I see an elite runner has, if I have the same interests, if I read the same books as them, if I have the same interests outside of the sport, then I will be far more likely to connect with that athlete and also listen to that person when they give out advice. And I think that's something that Marlene's team is doing really well, and I know that a lot of the big marathons are working on as well, is actually finding the commonalities between the elite athletes and the casual runner and bringing them together and getting them excited, because otherwise for anyone towing the line, it will be so far out of reach to compare themselves to any of those top names. So knowing that you have something in common and being able to connect with them will be far more important to them than anything else.
Yeah. Could I just jump in that? Sorry. Carry on, Michelle.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Marlene. Sorry, please go ahead.
I just have a small example that rightly points out what Michelle was just saying. When Geoffrey Kammerer was, before he won New York Marathon, he was waiting for the bus and he had a backpack on his back. It was the same as all every runner gets the same bag in that race. And we got so many responses that people felt like, hey, this athlete is waiting, just like me, waiting for the bus to go to the start line with exactly the same backpack on his back. And it was so comparable to how everyone felt that morning. And I think that's unique in running. Everyone is at the same start line and has the same, that day, it's all the same for everyone. And I believe to show that it really relates to a lot of runners.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Marlene. Excellent example. And Michelle as well, your points, I think they're all related. And one of the recommendations I had on how to link all of this with race starters also links with what you've just been saying about inclusivity and equality. So, because, we know that running is often referred to as an inclusive sport, but I'm not sure if it actually materializes in every event. I think there are events which actually do this and value it more. And I think I'm a recreational runner, and I also want to, each time I participate in an event, I want to feel as valued as all the elites are. And the examples that you've given of Marlene is very strong. So it's nice it's important to feel included and inclusive. Yeah.
Can I jump in, because that kind of segues really nicely into a question that Tracy Sunderland's put in. Hello, Tracy. Lovely to see you online. His question is there something extra you have to do as a race organizer to connect the elite athletes to citizen runners, to connect the front of the pack to the back of the pack using social media? Who would like to take that one?
Chris, do you want to go
I can
first?
start off. Yeah, I can start off. I think similar to what Marlene said, that we try to break down that barrier or humanize these athletes. Sometimes they run in the low 2-hour marathons and they think, I'm not gonna ever reach that and I have nothing in common. But when we invite athletes into our clinic series or into panels, we find some of the most frequent questions that are asked are, what's your fueling strategy? Or what do you have for breakfast? What do how do you get through a regular training day? And looking at some of the pure basics, runners are always looking to learn. So if we can break down kind of that intimidation, the speed intimidation from some of the top level athletes, and just provide them an opportunity to give a little insight on their day-to-day routines or things that the average runner struggles with, whether it be hill training or fueling or whatever it may be. We found that creating an opportunity for the professional athletes to give little nuggets of advice or tips and tricks, whether that be on social through kind of Q&A spotlights, or we feature our athletes in our official program and our clinic series. And I think that's a great way to kind of make those connections and break down those barriers. I think Marlene, you hit it. The top runners they're human, and I think we sometimes get so intimidated by that speed factor that they've learned the sport just like anybody else. So bringing that to the forefront, I think, is something we really strive to do, not just on social but across the board.
Marlene, you gave us a great example of that the other day with the Kenenisa Bekele story about the eating the elephant a bite at a time. Do you want to share that little story?
Well, it wasn't actually Kenenisa who said that, but it was Kenenisa who, for me, I've run one marathon in my life, so I don't necessarily count myself as an experienced marathon runner, but hearing him before that race talk about how much a marathon even still hurts him. I think he said the race starts until after 30 kilometers, even your small finger hurts. And that kind of makes you feel like, okay, actually, I have something very relatable or something in common with that athlete. And then similarly, I think accessibility is one of the key points that Chris has mentioned there. That's so important for anyone that is towing the start line to feel that they have something in common with them and they have some kind of touch point with the elites. I love it when races, as you said, either put on Q&As beforehand, some organized group runs beforehand. You can tie it to giveaways, to promotions and so forth. You can organize, I know in a COVID world, oftentimes you can organize Zoom calls with some of the top athletes beforehand to be able to ask those questions, because as I mentioned to you when we had our chat, Chris, the most valuable piece of advice that I've received again was from someone who has experienced marathon running, and it was, how do you eat an elephant in small chunks? And that's how you run a marathon. So really, I reset my watch after every 5K and didn't look at the overall time, but actually looking at it in small chunks and having kind of a personal piece of advice rather than something that you've read on the internet or that you've seen in a guide somewhere. It becomes so much more encouraging and you feel it's so much more personal to you. And I think having that close connection is a very big part in that. The other thing that Chris mentioned there, and to an extent Marlene said as well, is making the mass runners feel like they're as valued as the elites. So when it comes to what do you actually provide to them, what Marlene said, actually giving them the same kind of backpacks, but also what else is there available to them? Is it race photos? The other thing that we always joke about is the one thing that runners love more than running is pictures of themselves running, because they post them on social media. And there's this shift in kind of the traditional race photography that you as a mass runner get and that you pay for, and you pay 30 euros for a photo, and not everyone has that kind of disposable income on top of paying for the fees to enter a race and so forth. So to be able to think outside the box are the ways that I can include my partners, include sponsors, include the elites, and actually have opportunities for athletes to mass athletes to become an ambassador of your event by sharing photos from your event, similarly to how you would hopefully supply the elites with imagery from the event. It's kind of making those connections and making the runners feel valued, I think is very important.
Up on the imagery there, I'm interested to get a sense of in your research. No, you spoke early on about words and different hashtags and so on. When you're managing social media, that balance of the words versus the images and the types of images you use and the video content, can you maybe between the group, maybe we spend a few minutes just talking about that? What kind of advice would you be giving to race organizers out there as they're curating, as they facilitating this? Because we got on the call from world marathon majors of Chris's peers to Mike Nishi from Chicago, and then we've got small events with maybe one or two people running a team without a dedicated resource to be doing it. But in a practical sense, any guidelines in terms of what the balances might be relative to those different parts of content, and some practical ways of how they might be able to curate it and encourage those participants to build that community with the user-generated content.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Chris. So one of the important things to I think we all know is that runners are the best advocates themselves on social media of these different race events, and investing in them is so important. Chris Lobston was mentioning earlier, it's so important to actually bring that to the fore as well. Invest in the runners, whether they are elite or recreational, and giving them that equality. If where possible. I mean, obviously they're racing for different reasons, but everybody has a story to tell, as we've also been saying. Yeah, in terms of, I think you mentioned about the visual images. So words are important. Visual images are also important, and runners, when they post online, they actually share selfies and selfie. In my research, I actually asked my research participants what's the importance of a selfie, because before the research, I thought selfie actually is out there. If you put a selfie, it's more like bragging or humble bragging kind of, right? But one participant said a selfie is a snapshot of a moment in time, a post-run glow, or an awful workout shared. I think this is very important. It shows that it might have gone very well, and you look, really nice and beautiful, but you might actually look really awful but you might have had a very, very good training run. So to share that online and to capitalize on that, and it's part of the authenticity again. And another one said, for example, the role of a selfie is it comes down to pride, showing that we showed up and got it done. So it's that one. And in terms of what the race organizers, I think the photos were mentioned, and some races have their own their own photographers, and I have participated in races where my photograph was taken, but because I didn't get to the certain point in time as fast as some of the other runners did, I don't have photographs from that particular area, for example, and that sort of affects me as a runner. I think it's nice to have more, not just one or two photos from a race, if there's going to be a photographer, to make sure that slower runner also gets that opportunity to have their photograph taken. But apart from that, I also wanted to mention one more point which we haven't said at all, and that's about the I think sustainability is so important, and I'm finding more and more so in the UK. Race organizers are looking into this, and actually they have joined. There's this there's this community called Trees Not Teas. So so it's about saving the planet. We are actually all in a climate crisis, and how do we, as in race events, assure that we're not actually making it worse, but we are actually cutting down on this environmental waste. So this trees not teas is one that some UK race organizers use, where it's just encouraging the the runners who sign up to a race to tick a box if they don't want a t-shirt, for example. Instead, a tree will be planted. So it's nice to give that opportunity to them. I mean, it might be that the runner wants that, but then they can pay extra for that if they want that. And if they've paid extra for that t-shirt, then they will wear it and they won't waste it. So it's I think sustainability is important, something that obviously a longer discussion is needed, perhaps. But I wanted to make point of that.
If I could quickly come back to Michelle's, what you said about the images especially for all the runners. In one way, there's many sizes of organizations, but on the other hand, you can also easily ask a sponsor to pick this up, because if you have for 20, 30, 40, 50,000 runners, and they all have their own social media numbers, you can imagine how much reach you have. So by simply putting a little logo on it and providing these images for free, I'm quite sure there's sponsors interested who would pick this up. So in a way, it's not always about the size of the organization. It's also about finding partnerships and ways to get these things done. And it's not necessarily about how big your organization is, because I think it's a very good point that Michelle raises, because for a lot of people, running a marathon, it's not easy. I think for nobody it's easy, and it's a bucket list thing. So when you have this performance, you would like to, if it's a memory for yourself or if you want to share it with the whole world, but it's special. And I believe those emotions are important for a race to understand and to find ways to support those wishes from the runners. And in that sense, if you can find a partner who could pick this up for you, then it's a win-win, in my opinion.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah. If I could just jump in there too, Marlene, very similar to what you said. We found one of our learnings from the pandemic. We had a virtual marathon, and with that, we don't have photographers out on the course. Everybody's running in their own neighborhood, and so we reached out to athletes saying, share your experience, share your photos. And what we found was that the emotion expands well beyond just the roads, just you actually running. It involves your supporters, it involves your family, your volunteers. And from that learning, we looked at our race this past October and said, all right, how can we, our photographers really focus on the road, what's happening on the road. How can we tap into that emotion, like photos and images that show that emotion, that kind of like Nora said, the selfies, sometimes those are can tell a story even more than just an athlete competing. And what we found, we created a file sharing system where folks could upload any photo they took from marathon weekend, and the amount of content that we got and the amount of engagement, athletes either stopping at mile 5 to take a quick photo with their family, but the emotion is there, the storytelling there. And not everybody's trying to get from point A to point B as fast as they can. A lot are just trying to finish, and their families are part of that journey. And it created such a great new avenue, a new bunch of photos that we could use, and athletes really want to share. Going back to the very beginning of the discussion, they want to share their story, they want to share their experience. And as race organizers, sometimes we just think about those photographers who are capturing the running, but we have a great opportunity to ask our runners or our volunteers for photos directly from them that show not just the competitive side, but the personal and the emotional side of our sport, because that's so powerful, and that goes back to the authenticity and the reason why folks are getting involved there. It's so often bigger than just reaching the finish line. It's experiencing that journey with with their family or with their supporters. And I suggest folks to maybe think beyond just the photographers capturing the runners, and think about the spectators as well, because they can really tell a story themselves.
It's a great point, Chris, and maybe another part of that, you spoke about reaching the finishing line. We tend to celebrate the crossing the line, but what about the DNFs, the people that got halfway and dropped out, and the ones that didn't quite make it? How do we engage them and make them feel authentically part of a community in what might feel like, unfortunately, the way that we sometimes work, this moment of failure, which is in many ways a success in itself. But some examples of some stories that any of you might have seen, that whole a DNF is actually not so bad, but how do we represent that and help them to represent that on social media? That helps obviously create engagement with your community and your event.
Yeah, can I just answer that briefly, Chris? So the DNF, although it represents did not finish, I've come across on Instagram, there is a very well-known runner who's also on YouTube, Wild Ginger Running. I've forgotten her name, unfortunately, but it's Wild Ginger Running. And she actually did a session at the National Running Show a couple of years ago. And she said DNF actually did not finish, did not fail. So it's actually reversing that, the DNF. And there are lots of stories online. I mean, I have DNF'd in some races, and it encourages you to reflect on your experience. So and the social media is full of stories about DNF and what it actually does. How it helps runners. So learning from that experience, I think, is important for every runner.
I think also really important to remember is getting to the start line, and often it's actually making it to that part that plays a big part, and that's why the storytelling aspect in the lead up to a race and featuring those stories is really important too, and goes back to thinking about where do you position your photographers, because if you only have someone on the last 5 kilometers or the last mile or so, then not everyone is necessarily going to make that, but you might actually be capturing some really great emotions really early on at the start when you're amongst a lot of people that you have no idea who they are, who's running beside you, but you have something in common with them, and being able to share that, being able to reflect on those experiences, being able to use that. I like the did not fail terminology quite nicely. Like, it ties in together that you can celebrate the fact that you made it to the start line, you have something in common, and it allows you to then still have the potential to reflect on what went wrong. It's what Noor said right at the start when she was looking at the research that is available. So many athletes actually use the images or the posts that they share to reflect both on good and bad, and it's part of being authentic to be also able to share why you might have not succeeded in running a PB or finishing a race. So I think it's providing people with something that then gives them the opportunity to reflect and to share is equally as important as to provide them with a finisher medal.
Thanks, Michelle. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes, and we've got a couple of comments and questions that I'd just like to pick up on. We've got a question from Mary Kate Shea. Hi, Mary Kate. Please speak to the importance of gaining permission before posting visuals or text. Important to build trust and relationship before building engaging content. Who'd like to speak to that?
Yeah, that I can touch upon that. That's something, of course, we you can't post something without permission or without rights. I think that's rule number one. But I think one thing we have seen over the years is by being authentic and showcasing images. Just going to use an example with user generated content. By showcasing images that are submitted by athletes, and over the years, folks seeing how we do that. where we do that, how it uplifts folks or shares a little insight on what they might be going through or where they might be training. It builds up that trust and that I want to be part of this. I want to, oh, that was a really cool photo. I want to share where I'm training from, and it kind of creates a little bit of a snowball effect once folks see where others they might be competing around on the start line where they're training. They want to jump in and be part of the sharing as well.
Thanks, Chris. There was a comment in there as well, which just came up about parkrun use photos on Facebook very effectively in building their running, walking communities, and maybe many events are looking for best practice case studies. That's a great one, and obviously some of the bigger events do it well, and some small events do it well. Any other examples? I mean, Michelle, you've been around the traps. Any other resources that you can point people to? We're getting close to a wrap up, and I'm going to come around and ask each of you to give one tip, if there was one tip you could give, but maybe just from a resourcing perspective before we come to that, in any sense of where people can go to this is we could talk for 2 hours here, I'm sure, but beyond here, what are some resources that people might be able to access to help them?
I think what's really important is also for races to think about how you can collaborate with each other as well, how you can benefit from collaboration. I think it's something that we've, from a World Athletics perspective, we've been trying to do specifically with in-stadia events last year, with some of our WAS events, with Olympics, whereby we've actually made a conscious effort in how can we supply athletes, supply member federations, supply relevant stakeholders with imagery, because we know that it gets people talking about the sport, which is always a good thing. So trying to find ways to get people to collaborate is a really important one, and to look at, okay, how are we resourcing? Do we have a photographer on site? Do we know somebody else that is on site that might also be wanting to collaborate on that? How can we support each other? I think is a very important one to think about, and it's something that we're trying to encourage more of and trying to contribute to.
Yeah, and a little bit aligned to that collaboration, Steve Fleck was there, and he was talking. We've been talking about putting these great stories on social media, but the point that he made is, as an announcer, which he does across Canada, getting those stories on the finish line is so great to create engagement. And I think sometimes we kind of tend to be one directional, and we look at we miss what might just be one step to the left or to the right, whether that's partnering with another organisation or using this in other parts of your event, maybe a testimonial wall in your expo, or these kind of things, which is telling that amazing story that builds the engagement. We're very close to wrap up. As I said, we could keep talking for ages. Let's go a quick loop around, and if you could give one tip relative to the topic that you think might be useful to race organisers and others that are watching here, maybe starting with you, Nur, and then going Michelle, Marlene, and finishing up with Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I think the key thing for me is inclusivity, that ensuring that those runners at the back of the pack runners feel as included the same way as those who are actually fast, speedy runners. So I'm not comparing elite with elite. Just some runners are fast. So just making sure that everybody is valued, that everybody is vital to that race to go well, and we all have our own stories, and we all want to do well.
Michelle?
I think following on from what Noah said, accessibility, both to assets, to the elites, to resources, to tips, I think is a very important one. How can a race organizer make the race as accessible to any participant? How can they make the elites more accessible to the mass participants? How can the elites make themselves more accessible, and vice versa? I think that's the key that I think helps drive kind of publicity and that feel-good factor that mass races do hold.
Another great point. Thank you. Marlene?
Yeah, I'll be quick, because I have 2 points that I'd like to raise. Is one, it's unique that you have a period of build-up for people to race. So from the moment they subscribe, you have their connection. So use the connection to spread your word. That's one. The other one is that there is media, there's social media, and it sometimes seems an investment in social media now, but I think on the long term, it will give you the benefits. So sometimes it's a new way of thinking about traditional media and social media. You need to use them both. But sometimes it's a little bit of letting go of the old way of thinking about media and include social media as a strategic tool.
Thank you, Marlene. And Chris?
Yes, one thing I just encourage folks to think about is social media isn't just social, social channels. Whatever is successful on social, it can really bleed into other elements of your event, whether it's newsletters or clinics or Q&As on site. We really try hard to create that overarching, whatever's successful in social, how can we share it or how can we promote it or tap into it on the other things that we do, so surrounding our events. So sometimes we tend to think of social media in a little bit of a tunnel vision, but think about how it kind of can tap into your other ancillary events.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. So just quickly, inclusivity, accessibility, ability, use the build-up, invest, change the mind of thinking, and it's not just on the social channels. There's lots of different ways it can apply. What a wonderful conversation. We could have gone on for way longer, but some really great insights. Thank you so much. Join me in giving a virtual round of applause. Noor Houghton, Dr. Noor Houghton, Michelle Zammit, Marlene Rink-Vennings, and Chris Lotsbaum. Thank you. Thank you so much, and we'll move on to the next session. Thank you, folks. As we welcome our next guest and a friend of everyone on here, as well as our guest on the platform, or the topic of runners, how to derive pleasure in times of pain and bodily distress. Please help me to welcome Dr. Asaf Lev, sports and exercise anthropologist, senior lecturer, Ono Academic College. Hello there, Asaf. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very delighted to be part of this great webinar. And thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Really looking forward to it. And in conversation with Alessio Punzi, Road Events Manager, World Athletics. Hi, Alessio. I'm going to step out the way and leave you to have a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And
Hi, Alessio.
thank you, Dr. Hello. Good to see you. And it's good to see so many.
You. Again,
so many friends online. You and I have interacted before, but the others might be interested in knowing more about your academic background, why you're here, and what your area of research is.
Well, as a social anthropologist, I've been always kind of fascinated by just the concept of pain. Back in the day, I was a professional basketball player, and I have been injured so many times. Fast forward, when I was starting my dissertation regarding long-distance runners, middle-aged long-distance runner, the concept of pain was a great theme repeatedly every time when I just heard about the pain, when I just see how people experience pain. I was fascinating how pain can be leveraged in order to consolidate, for instance, running self or running identity. So in this regard, I asked myself, among other questions, how people derive pleasure, or what people sometimes call running high, how to derive pleasure in times of pain and bodily distress. So that was part of my study, basically.
That is your area of interest. Dr. Lev, you shared a couple of your recent papers with me prior to this, for me to prepare for this session. And immediately as I started reading, I'm a bit of a runner, more of a cyclist than a runner, especially if I compare myself with some of the people on the call. I see that we have Scott Overall and probably also other professional and former professional runners. I always thought that pleasure of that nice feeling of pleasure that you get when you run, that was the runner's high. But then I realized reading your paper that I was widely mistaken. That was the state of flow. So what exactly is the runner high? And I'm reading, you maintain that that is a socially mediated process. What exactly do you mean?
Right. So for me, I was doubting the whole concept of deriving pleasure in a vacuum. Like there's like you can start running and then give or take after a short term, you can just you can experience a sense of even flow, but I would even say running high. And while engaging and delving myself into the distance running culture, I've noticed that feeling high from long distance running can be achieved through a process of socialization, basically conveyed by runners' peer group. So in this regard, I've heard many runners like told me right from the get-go that they didn't really understand how they manage to love running, how they manage to derive pleasure out of it, because for them, quote unquote, I would say it's like going to the dentist. So I asked myself, well, if this is true, if this is like running high is a self-evident process, why people do not derive pleasure right from the get-go? And then bit by bit, I have noticed that the whole process of learning, and what we sometimes sociologists, anthropology, we call process of socialization, plays a significant role in learning to derive pleasure, okay, in times of bodily distress. So as part of my finding, I would there's some key findings in my study illustrate that there are like coherent stages a novice runner must experience in order to become a long distance runner and of course to and enjoy the pain. So the first phase obviously is and it's a given, learning the proper running technique required just to experience positive effects. That means learning how to run and just to, I would even say, running posture and many things that has to do with some like what I call just the running technique. And the second phase, that would be just recognizing the effects, recognize the effects of pain and their connection with running world or with the running culture. And obviously the third thing, which is kind of like probably the most compound phase, is just enjoying the effects of pain caused by running. And in this context, runners should learn to interpret or to reframe their pain as something as something good, as something rewarding. Otherwise, I think that probably this is a crucial step, because without this, I would argue that only if novice runners are persistent and capable of reframing and interpreting their pain or their bodily sensation as a state of pleasure or relaxation, only then just will they be able to continue with distance running.
Doctor, most of the people on the call, probably all, but you never know, are not anthropologists. Most of them are race organizers. So I'm going to ask you a question that is relevant with a sports marketer hat on, sort of. You described these three different phases in which a novice runner becomes a distance runner. From the standpoint of a race organizer who has to interest people in their event, and basically race organizers that have to sell entries, have to sell bibs for the event, do you think that there are different languages, different techniques, different topics that might be brought up to cater to runners in each of these stages? And in which of these stages is a novice runner more likely to take part in organized activities, if you have an idea?
Right. I would say the third one, like the third phase, because this is because that's basically, this is where you become a runner. As I just mentioned earlier, that deriving, learning how to enjoy and to reframe pain is something enjoyable. This is part of the whole concept of being a runner. I would argue that all our participants here just experience pain. Maybe they're like, while we speaking, they just experience pain just as part of just their running routines. But as I have argued just before, that pain that's a very important. It's important element in consolidating running identity. So while I would say in the first and the second phase, you're not really all in, you're not really a runner. I would say you are a runner. I would even say a true running in a way, when you learn to interpret the pain as something positive, and then you can keep going. So I would say the third phase. That's probably the most important and less technical phase among the others.
And you said that this pain is not a byproduct of running, but it's an integral part of running. I have to relate to my experience here and that of many other cyclists. Cyclists tend to have pretty traumatic injuries when they get injured. I broke my collarbone, like most cyclists, and for some time it really was a badge of honor. You would show your scars because that is what makes you a cyclist, a real cyclist out of you. You said the other day that even in running there are some similar signifiers of the fact that you're a runner through pain, taping and the like. Can you dwell on that?
Yeah, so the whole manifestation of pain is fascinating. I remember when I was, again, really back in the day, when I was playing basketball, professional basketball. Then pain was something that one must hide. Even our bandages were kind of like brown, was in the color of the skin. So this is something that you want to hide your pain. That was underneath your clothing. This is something that you weren't really proud of your pain. But you see what happened today. I mean, we need the pain. We need to manifest, to display our pain almost everywhere. I would even say even in just like places when people can really see our pain, and you can see we can see just the transition, the significant transition in the way the bandages today, the way it looks. Again, if back in the day they were like in the color of the skin, today the bandages, you can see the like colorful pink and blue, and the isokinetic tapes, and those tapes are all over the place. And one of the questions that I asked myself is why there's such a contrast. Excuse me. You can see it's all over the place. You can see those colorful bandages and isokinetic tapes all over the place, and this is a good way for distance runners just to show or just to show their achievement as runners, and then other people can just ask you, what do you have here, and what's going on here? And then this is a great way for you just to start telling your narrative pain, just to say, oh yeah, I was running 21K last weekend, and I was participating in an ultra marathon, and I had a problem. I was injured here and there. So in this way, we can utilize those props. I would even say props, just in order we can leverage those props in order just to gain social recognition. And for me, just running or runners without social recognition, it's almost impossible. It links, heavily links, I would even say.
Doctor, after this call, I will probably go to grab a bite at a restaurant nearby. Yesterday I went for a run, and currently I've got sore calves. Is it fine for me to complain about my pain, my sore calves in the restaurant? Is it fine to complain about it in the office? Because I read something in your research that talks about the social situation in places where you're actually encouraged to talk about your physical distress. Can you help me understand?
Yes, yes. So two things I would say. First of all, I have noticed time after time how people manifest their pains. For instance, in some marathon events. So people like to more and more they conduct more kind of like pain display. They manifest their pain where there are more people around. So they can really show, you can say, how they suffer, of course, just in case they know that they can complete the marathon, they can cross the finish line. Many times I saw just runners completely changing their whole facade, their facial expressions, and embracing like completely different facial, of being in like agony and expressing excruciating pain when there's like people around them, and then they can really show how they work for this. So the whole just running display is very super important, I would say. As I've mentioned before, I would even say that running seeks to control and manage pain through also through a dialogue of alienation. And I'll just talk about it maybe a little bit later. But as for your question, yes, this is definitely that was a common theme in my study. Just Paul, just in front of large audience, people more manifest their pain, their effort, and how and the difficulties. So it's and of course, it has to do with what I've mentioned before, the social recognition. In my study, that was so strong, the linkage between embracing running identity and sharing my pain narrative is hands down very quite strong. So, yeah.
Doctor, and did you notice any, you said that you used to be a professional basketball player, and I assume your research has focused on a particular area of the world. Have you noticed any differences between sports in which still nowadays pain is hidden versus sports where it's exhibited? And then a follow-up question I would have on that is, and I don't know if Marlene is still on the call, does it change across cultures? If you are a Western European or an Israeli runner versus a professional Ethiopian or Kenyan runners, would the extent to which you display your physical distress change?
Oh, totally. There's no question about it. As an anthropologist, I can tell you that that's for anthropologists and sociologists, the culture thing is quite a very significant aspect. Of course, we cannot draw a conclusion and just to generalize and just say that people experience, like all around, people experience pain the same. Of course, that our culture shape and reshape our responses to pain, but also the way we interpretate pain. So we should just remember that. I think that in Israel, or more specifically even in Tel Aviv, but say even in Israel in general, yes, you can see that pain is something that you can see runners more fascinated by. This is the whole militaristic, I would say, militaristic scene is quite vast in the Israeli society. And you can see, for instance, how some runners, they relate their pain sensations into some the army experiences, for instance. So on one hand, you can experience your pain, and which is perfectly okay, but you're not allowed not to eliminate or not to complete your marathon. So those macho culture it's quite significant in Israel, and I would say definitely, I would argue that the militaristic culture in Israel is, as opposed to other countries in Europe or in the U.S., is completely different. So it's a completely different ball game here. Just it's a pain that should be embraced. This is okay to manifest pain, but God forbid, yeah, you're not allowed to fail or just to you're allowed. This is okay to talk about the pain as long as you complete the marathon, is that you achieve your goal. So not achieving your goal here in Israel, I think it's kind of more even degrading and to a large degree. And this is something that I would argue that in other cultures, other countries, it won't be the same. So
that's right. It is just occurring to me now. We haven't mentioned this in our prep call, but it's occurring to me now that probably what you said is one of the reasons for the success of the obstacle course races, especially some kinds of it, in which basically, unless you're an elite, there is really no cut time. You have to finish it, and then in some cases, many cases, you even line up at the obstacles, and it's all about overcoming. And yes, there is an element of potential injury, there is an element of potential risk, but in reality, you know you can do it. Organizers know you can do it, and that is what probably gives you that thrill of the perfect balance between challenging, risky, but not too risky. From the standpoint of a race organizer, Doctor, are there any behavior that you think a race organizer should engage in, pressing on that key more or less? In other words, in some other sports, and again, I must refer to cycling as it's after athletics, the one I know best. Race organizers really stress the fact that a race is especially brutal, that a climb is particularly steep. From the standpoint of a race organizer, you don't really see that because a marathon is a marathon. Clearly, all marathons are already an extraordinary feat, but you don't really see anyone advertising, come to our grueling marathon with horrible weather. What can you tell us about that?
That's a tricky question, I must say, but I would suggest maybe more platforms for runners to express their pain. And again, in our conversation here, we're focusing on the pain because that's the topic. But of course, there's some other aspect. But again, given the fact that I have never met a distance runner who never experienced like a lot of types of pain. I would say transient pain, acute pain, chronic pain, benign pain. So we all know how important pain is. So what I would suggest is for more platforms for individuals, for runners, to express their pain, because I think that people need the drama. They need the drama. They need just to talk about it. They need just to show how they achieved. So it's not really a big deal just to say, yeah, that was really easy. That was like no-brainer. It was like a simple undertaking and just, completed the marathon. You just want to show that you worked for that and you overcame many obstacles, many hurdles on the way to the finish line. So you worked hard for that. So I would suggest more, again, platform that focusing on pain narratives, and then people can really present their drama. And I think that drama is very important because I didn't mention that, but for the people in pain, for someone who's pain, I mean, pain is a certain thing for an individual who experience pain, but pain is also there's doubt for the people who hear about pain. So on one hand, again, pain has like a significant amount of certainty, but on the other hand, there's a lot of doubts here. So let's give the people, the individual, the distance runners, the platform just to talk about their pain, to increase the drama, and to get the credit for that.
Interesting. Get the credit for that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Dr. Lev, a couple of questions very briefly from the audience. One is from Albert Guy. Is it invalid to share your pain if you didn't complete a race?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Am I allowed to share my pain if I haven't completed a race?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, so I must admit that in my study, beside a few distance runners, the vast majority completed the marathon, the first marathon, and of course, for those who didn't, I would say yes, but I would argue that in addition to that, you also want to work on your corrective experience. You want to work on the next one, or just and not just say, oh, okay, so I did not complete my marathon. I had a lot of pain, and now I'm going to give up. So what I would say, I would suggest work on the second chance to complete the marathon, and and I think then you're going to be all right with it, okay, with that manifesting that pain experiences. Of course, no one is going to, it depends. Again, it depends. We talked about just how culture context is it, but again, I would argue that that should be an ongoing process. Okay, if you want to talk about the pain while failing, while not completing the marathon, make sure that there is an ongoing process for you, and you're going to complete hopefully the next one.
Tying to what Dr. Nutt said earlier, you don't want to be portraying any fraudulent transformations. You have to go through the whole pain of it to become a real marathoner. Last question from the audience, Doctor. Do you think that some of the difference between the experience of pain in beginner runners compared with the expert runners is anything to do with the feeling of being in control of their pain?
Can you please repeat, because I understood the second part of the question?
Do you think that some of the difference between the experience of pain in beginner runners compared with more expert runners is to do with the feeling of being in control of that pain?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yes, I would say that veteran runners are definitely more in control. They're totally trying or choosing some very interesting strategies in order to manage their pain. I would say that yes, runners seeks to control and manage pain through sometimes a dialogue of alienation, and it takes place more among skillful distance runners. Like looking or treating or referring their painful body parts as external objects, enable them to free themselves in a way of the responsibility of being injured, and to humanize their pain. In this way, they can really have a dialogue, an interesting dialogue of their injury. They can talk to their body part in a second person, and I've seen it so many times. Talk to your knee, blaming your knees, yelling at your knees, or other painful body part. And in this way, again, you can create a dialogue, and you can free yourself as a runner of the responsibility of being injured. And this is super interesting how distance running humanizing their bodies.
Pain management, as noted, Tracy Sandon, who knows one thing or two about coaching, having been on the track since the mid-60s. Pain management. Dr. Lev, our time unfortunately is up, but we would like to have you with us. Next time we'll do a webinar on trail running, because there is this whole ultra running dimension that we haven't even scratched. I'd like to thank you on behalf of World Athletics for being with us today. This was Dr. Asaf Lev from Ono Academic College in Israel. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alicio. Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asaf Lev. Some wonderful insights there. Thank you, Alessio. Wonderful conversation. So many takeaways. Learn to interpret pain as something positive. It's almost impossible to be a runner without pain. People need the drama. Give them the platform. And I guess there's many ways. We spoke about social media and the platforms we have there. Obviously, the race course is the platform for them maybe to exhibit that pain or experience it in person. But then how does that really translate to our social media channels that we were talking about before? We want people to embrace pain. We want them to deal with pain, but hopefully not push that pain too far that they end up in a medical tent, which is one of our big challenges, which segues me into our next guest. A number of times we've had him on the show before, an old friend of MPW and obviously part of World Athletics. Please welcome Dr. Paolo Emilio Adami, MD, PhD, Medical Manager, Health and Science Department, World Athletics, who's going to give us a short little segment on race emergency medical courses. Wonderful to see you, Paolo. How are you?
Great, thank you. It's very nice to see you. I'm good, Chris, and thank you very much for having me with you today. I promise I won't steal too much of your time. I know it's a very busy day today program, so I'll briefly share one presentation, if that's okay, and then guide you through few slides, very few slides. And this is just a very quick update on a good news, actually. We've finally been able to resume the race emergency medicine courses that unfortunately stopped because of the pandemic in 2019. So we're just resuming this now. As a reminder, these courses are organized in partnership with the IARM, the organization with whom all this would have been possible. And the good news is that the courses are actually already available and open for registration. Just as a quick reminder, the course's objectives are to ensure the same standards of medical care are provided in all World Athletics road races. So it's not actually to change what it's already existing in road races. It's to make sure that the same type of care is provided worldwide if it's a labeled race. The second objective is to promote consistency in medical treatment based on the most up-to-date scientific knowledge and evidences. So that's why we're working with the IRM. They have the best scientists there. They have great experience. We want to share that knowledge, the most up-to-date evidences that are available in treating runners and patients. Third objective is to encourage continuing medical education on running specific medical issues for healthcare staff. Running specific medical issues are very different from what you would see, from what a physician would see in a clinical practice in a hospital. So that need and the medical care that it's necessary on the medical tent of the finish line, it's very different from a normal clinical setting. It's much more close to military medicine than regular medicine. So there's a specific medical education that goes with that. This is one of the objectives, share that type of knowledge. And finally, strengthen the network of race medical directors. It's a global network that we've been building since 2019. So we would really like to bring that step forward and make sure that the medical directors from different races, they get together, they share their experience, their knowledge, best practices, what did work where, what didn't work, what's the learning point there. The course as it is now is structured in 3 steps. Each one is fundamental to move over to the next step. The e-learning part is the first one that it's purely theoretical, and that based on this knowledge, then the following 2 steps are organized. There is a second part that takes place in presence, so physically during the days before a marathon, where participants get together, they practice, they simulate different scenarios, they get to test how different devices operates and how they work. And the third step is volunteering, as we call it, or job shadowing. So the participants will have access to the medical facilities of one of the races that it's hosting us, and we'll get to see how the medical staff works, operate. We'll be able to contribute if fancy, and they will physically be able to see how that knowledge, skills can then be turned into abilities when it's needed. The next courses, we have a busy year ahead. And I would like to thank all these race organizers for supporting our courses. The first one will be in Milan during the Milan Marathon early April. Then we'll be going to Boston Marathon. We have the Lisbon Marathon in October, followed by the Cape Town Marathon and the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington DC at the end of October. And we will be back in Singapore for the Singapore Marathon, and then right before Christmas in Chonburi in Thailand with the Bangkok 21 half marathon. Again, thank you very much for all these organizers. They've been extremely helpful in helping us organizing this and encouraging continuing medical education for medical staff. All the information can be found at the website here under. Very important to let you know is that the Boston course will be opened by an international conference that it's organized again thanks to the Boston medical team and Boston Marathon organizers. It will be in a fantastic venue, the Boston Public Library. So very welcome to come. It's a great panel of speakers. All the information could be found on our website or on the IARM website. Final information, website and email address, feel free to reach out. Just want to conclude this course. It's recommended and let's say mandatory for race medical directors of World Athletics label races. So it's very important that the support again comes from everyone when we ensure that the best medical care is provided to our runners and participants. That's actually from my side. I hope I haven't stolen too much of your time. I'm here and happy to answer any question, or feel free to reach out by email if you need more information. Thanks, Chris. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Paolo. Wonderful news, a great partnership between World Athletics and IRM, and one of the great positives, obviously, of the pandemic in so many ways has been this global collaboration and setting up this network of medical directors across the globe, such an important part of our industry, getting the runners to the finish line safely. So congratulations on that, and very happy as we communicated, spread the word as far as possible. Great to see you again, and all the very best with that busy schedule.
Thank you, Chris. Good continuation.
Paolo.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Next up, we move into another fairly in-depth information session here. We're going to be talking about world rankings. We're going to be talking about rule refreshers and course measurements, updates from the World Athletics statistical team. And I'm going to welcome to the screens Carlo De Angeli, Head of Sports Services, World Athletics, joining us from Monaco. Hello there, Carlo. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Good to see you again. Joining Carlo, we have Andres Sabo, who's the statistician partner for World Athletics. He's usually based out of Hungary, I believe today in Austria. Welcome, Andres.
Hello.
Hello
good
there,
evening.
Andres.
Or good afternoon or good morning, whoever joins us. Welcome, everybody.
Nice to see you. Thank you. And then also joining us from London, but a different kind of London that most of your minds would go to, London, Ontario in Canada, Bernie Conway, who's the International Measurement Administrator for the Americas, who's going to give us some course measurement information. Welcome, Bernie.
Oh, good, Chris. It's nice to be able to see everyone.
Wonderful. I'm going to step away and leave it to you, gentlemen, and we'll monitor any questions you may have in the chat. So if you have any questions either on Paolo's session, we'll get those across to Paolo, or any of these gentlemen as we go through. Please pop them in the chat and we'll do our best to get them answered. Over to you then, Carlo.
Thank you, Chris. I'll kick off, and then Andras will do part of our presentation, and then Bernie, perhaps you can join at the end. I think, as you see, we'll end our presentation. It will lead quite tightly into what you will have to say. So I'll start sharing my screen. All right. So just a couple of words about what I do in World Athletics and what Andras does. I am responsible for all statistics and results matters. And of course, with all the implications that has on with the world records and area records, entry standards, world rankings, top lists, and everything else. Obviously, That I'm not alone. We process results from some 15,000 competitions every year. So Andras leads a team of statisticians and experts in Hungary. And Andras is the general director of a company called Elite, as I say, which works with us from 2018. So as a bit of introduction, we'd like to explain why we are here. And essentially, it's because there are some significant changes ahead about the world of results and how, in particular, World Athletics will manage results in the near future. And the reason for this change is basically because of the definition of international competitions, which currently appears in the Book of Rules. For the sake of integrity of our sport, we have to ensure at World Athletics that all results that we process are conducted in competitions which are held in compliance with all our rules and in particular with the technical and competition rules. Now, the current, as I said, the current rule book says that the obligation is for the international competitions to apply those rules. But the reality we know is that our assumption is that these rules are applied across the board, therefore also at domestic level. And that's where indeed probably 95% of the competitions for which we process results are national permit competitions. So that is our assumption, but the reality is, as unfortunately, that is not always the case. And that's why we are going to take a different approach. There is, of course, an impact on road running. A lot of those 15,000 competitions are road running competitions. And although a lot of you here are label race organizers, a lot are also organizers of domestic competitions and domestic road races. So that is an element that also needs to be considered, especially when there is in association with a lead race, a mass race element. And we'll speak about that in a moment. And also the introduction we all know about of the not so recent anymore shoe regulations has increased the need for a review. We are often asked by shoe manufacturers, well, where do the shoe rules actually apply? And we say, well, they apply wherever World Athletics rules are applied. But as I just explained, that's not very, very clear, hence the need to review. So what is this new approach? Well, instead of using the international competitions definitions, which we have seen is not really fit for purpose, we are going to introduce a new concept, which regardless of whether a competition is international or holds an area permit or a label or is a domestic competition, we will identify a finite list of competitions that's going to be published on the website and therefore available and accessible to everyone, where there is certainty that World Athletics rules are applied. By certainty, I mean at least a commitment in writing through an application process that those rules will be applied. And what will happen is that we will only take results from those competitions and use them for the World Athletics purposes, such as I mentioned, performances, entry standards, world rankings, world records, and area records, obviously subject to the usual ratification procedures. So how to get there, how to arrive at this finite list of competitions. And here I'm focusing on road races. So as I mentioned, a centralized application process. Now you already have, through my colleague Alessio and his colleague Benjamin, a process for centralizing the application for labor races. But we have to, as I said, extend that to all road running competitions that intend to apply for this and that do apply World Athletics rules. So one thing is centralized application. The other one is a commitment to apply, as I was saying, the relevant World Athletics rules. And here we're just highlighting a few. There are a lot of others, but these might be the key ones. The first one is the member federation endorsement. So through this application process, member federations will have the ability and actually the right and duty to endorse or otherwise the application of any competition, be it road race or anything else. Obviously, the course measurement and the officiating at the race. timing and results, and we'll go into a bit more detail in a couple of slides on that. The drinking, sponging, and refreshment stations. There are rules in the rule book on how those should be placed and disciplined and managed. The shoe regulations I mentioned before. So the assumption is that shoe regulations are applied whenever World Athletics rules apply. But again, that might not always be possible or the case. Core room procedures, where things such as bibs, shoes, mechanical aids, etc., are checked. This is normal practice for stadium competitions, and it should be, to the extent possible, obviously not in the same maybe structured way, but there should be some type of core room check also for road races. And then last but not least, the athlete's eligibility. There are things such as allegiance, so whether an athlete is actually representing one country or another. Suspended athletes, how are those dealt with? Should they be allowed to start? Should they not be allowed to start? The status of the Russian athletes and the AN neutral athlete status, etc. So all those are elements that we manage within the results within our database, and the race organizers and the results that come to us from those race organizers have to be aligned. So ultimately, what do we have to do? We have to make sure that whatever results we process of athletes in a given race are from athletes who have agreed to and have been checked for complying with the rules. And that's in addition to the course itself complying with the rules and the conduct of the competition. So basically what that means is that there is a need for the organizers to pre-identify athletes who will be subject to this rule compliance, which is basically the distinction that a lot of you have already made throughout this webinar on the elite component and the mass race component. And a lot of you already deal with elite race and in a certain way and already enforce the application of those rules. But as I said, this will have to be something that is going to have to be applied throughout any competition on the road that wishes from now on, or from the beginning of next year, to be precise, whose results will be processed by World Athletics. And here on the screen, just a bit of an example of how we process results today and how we would in the future. On the left, you have let's say for ease of discussion, just the 16 athletes running a women's marathon. And today, we would only process either the top 3 or any results that is within the limits of our database. And at the moment for the women's marathon, that limit is 3 hours. So in this case, you can see on the right the results from that race as they are in our database. And as I said, because there's only one athlete within that limit, we actually take the top 3 and as they appear on the screen. Now, we would ignore all the other results today. But what happens tomorrow? So tomorrow, you would have to, as an organizer, declare which athletes are part of your elite race and which athletes are not. So again, going back to the example on the left, let's say you had 16 runners in the race and only identified as elite runners the ones circled in green. Then we would process all the results of those runners circled in green, not just the top 3, but all of them, because we would assume that those athletes have competed in a race which was conducted according to the rules, and they themselves were subject to the checking that was mentioned before with compliance with the rules. On the other hand, if there's a couple of athletes there circled in black, and assuming those athletes were not part of your elite field, pre-identified elite field, then their results would not be processed by World Athletics. So they would be left out. Hope that this little example illustrates where we're heading, and I'll hand over the floor to Andras, maybe just for an additional comment on this, and then for the next couple of slides. Over to you, Andras.
Yes, thank you, Carlo. Thank you very much. Welcome everybody again. So just a few words on results processing, because we are switching the view and the approach of processing what Carlo just mentioned. So far, the the results up to the limit, which we had in the top list standards. If you go to the World Athletics top list, you will see the standards for all road running distances. And we've been processing results up until those marks given if the race was obviously certified on a certified course, and and we received the gun times for these results. We processed those results mainly, and and not everything else. And the other thing was that we did not differentiate between elite field and mass race in a way. If we received results from the first I don't know, 50, 100 athletes, no matter if they were elite or mass, if they were given a gun time, we've been processing those results. This approach will obviously change a little, and we will only focusing on the elite field, for whom, as Carlos said, all rules will be applied. And we've been processing the full results, but for these results processing, there's a few different things we would like to emphasize and ask for all organizers to make sure they submit results in a way we can and would like to process. First of all, there is this mixed and woman-only race. Usually, I mean, in the past, most races were generally mixed races with women actually racing along with men with the same field. And recently, it started with a few races having women-only race, and then the male and the mass race started together or in different tiers. For these, obviously, we need the results in a separate sheet for us to know if we had a woman-only race and not mixing together with males. So in this way, it is clear that there was a woman-only race. The other important question is the gun time versus chip time, and the indication of these timings in the result sheets. So far, we received many different formats regarding, but it not necessarily were actually indicated in the results. So if there's two columns with chip time and gun time, it is obviously clear for us. We know the gun time and we can process the result. If there's only one column with only saying finish, this doesn't really indicate if the time was gun time or this is the chip time of the runners. Obviously, it can be somehow find out by clicking an athlete on the internet results and try to find out if there's a gun time indicated inside for each athlete, but it's always better to have in one single list with gun times indicated. That would be very, very helpful for us. And definitely, yeah, Carlo, can you just do? Yeah. So, and few words only, this woman-only race separately and with sufficient time difference kept between the women's and men's races. Obviously, women's race have to be started first, and making sure that male the male runners will not catch up the females, so they cannot actually pace them in this way. And also, it's very important that it's not enough to have a woman only race. Have to make sure that only female pacemakers are running with the girls and not males, because if there are male pacemakers, this is still can be considered or should be considered as a mixed race and will be not a woman only. And and obviously, as I said before, it is a very important information, and somehow in the results this should be indicated if the women's times were actually from a woman only race or from a mixed race, because for records, for world records, it makes a difference. And about the submission of the results, if we go with this world ranking competitions project and we will focus on elite races, obviously we will process the full and complete result list of the elite races. Otherwise, if we receive results until the top list limits, which I mentioned, can be in the top list section on the World Athletics label races, for example. Obviously, we would like to receive all the results of these races. Obviously, what I said, the gun times should be indicated in the results, and the clear indication if the race was a mixed or woman only race for the female field. And it's mainly for statistical purposes, but it's very useful for us to receive the did not finish athletes from the elite fields if and whenever it's possible. And also, it would be for the future, it would be very, very helpful to either indicate the athletes' IDs, the World Athletics code of the athletes, of the participating elite athletes, or at least a birth year or a date of birth for the athletes, especially for African athletes. There are so many of them, and it's very, very hard to keep track of them. So if we can have this information, it's always very useful. So we will not mix them actually with other athletes in the results. And yeah, I think I finished, Carlo. So
okay, thank you, Andras. I will take it from here. I heard Andras breaking up sometimes. I don't know if it was my audio or his, but if there's anything that was not clear, just reach out either through the chat, or I will give you the email for our statistics service at the end. So any questions you do have, please, any doubt, just reach out to us. Couple more slides. The one word on the world rankings, some good news, I hope. There was a recent decision by the Competition Commission at the end of last year that seeing the growing popularity of the shorter road running races, the 5K and the 10K, these should be brought into the world rankings for the 5,000 meters and the 10,000 meters. So this means that athletes today competing on those road distances can actually accumulate world ranking points for the corresponding track events, and therefore towards their qualifications for major championships and indeed the Olympic Games. But that also means that those distances will require an international measurement certificate, just like today is the case for the half marathon, the 30K, the 35K, and the marathon, if those results are valid for qualification purposes for the major championships. And in addition to that, again, with the growing popularity of the road mile, this will soon be introduced as a new event in our rulebook. It doesn't currently exist. There is no such thing as a road mile, although it's contested widely. So we are going to make that much needed addition. But that again will mean that, and what will what we're working on is probably introducing the road mile as a future world championships, maybe within the road running championships event. But again, this means that the road mile too will require an international measurement for it to be recognized for our statistics purposes. Last slide, and then I will hand over to Bernie. Drop and separation, maybe this is just common, everybody knows about it, but just as a refresher, and across and for all road distances. So the ones I mentioned on the screen before, remember that the drop has to be less or equal to 1 meter per kilometer for the purpose of world records, and that the separation should be equal or less than 50%. That again for world record purposes. For entry standards, and indeed for our top list, and therefore for qualification to world championships and Olympic Games for entry standards, the drop remains the same. So the tolerance is still less than or equal to 1 meter per kilometer, but there is no separation limit. And instead for world rankings, again, no separation limit, but we also process courses which exceed the allowed drop. There is a points correction, so there's a reduction in points. Then I don't want to bore you with too many details. It is in the ranking rules on the website, but points are reduced by a certain amount every meter of drop. And a reminder, statistics at worldathletics.org. If you have any questions and just want to reach out, any clarifications, we'll really be happy to take that on board and come back to you as soon as possible. Chris, over to you for us, unless there are questions that you think we should answer, or just over to Bernie maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carlo and Andres. Let's go straight over to Bernie, and we'll hand it over to you. Thank you. Maybe if you could just stop your share. Yep, that's wonderful. Thanks. All yours, Bernie.
I'm the International Measurement Administrator for the Americas. I have two models that I follow. One is that if you're only going to give one thing to a runner, it should be an accurate course. And the other model is just similar, is if the distance isn't accurate, the times are meaningless. I feel that that the accuracy of a road race or whether it's running or whether it's race walking or whatever, must be accurate. And that's what certification makes sure that is done. I had a couple of URLs I sent. I guess they're not available at the moment. You'll be able to get them online later, but one of them was a sheet that I had given out.
Bernie, sorry to interrupt you there. We will just pop those. We thought it would be easier for people to download them. Alessio is going to put those into the chat. So if you'd like to just talk about them, he'll put them in the chat. We'll also send out your documents to people afterwards that have joined the webinar.
I appreciate that very much. Thanks, Chris.
No worries at all.
I'm looking at the first one, which is labeled Course Measurement Workshop. It's something I give it out to the new measures so that it can help them learn how to measure and what the hardest part of actually measuring is actually making a good map. Anyway, so I've got the information about how to download certain programs like Google Earth, Google Maps, Map My Run, On the Go Map, etc., how to use that to get a good picture of where the running race is going to go, or whether it's just being used as an individual as part of your training. It's a good thing to do. For race directors, I've got a few things on that sheet you'd find interesting as well. The first one is a measurement video by Tom McBrayer. Tom is a retired grade A measurer from the U.S., Houston, I believe. And he does a very good job explaining what we go through to get the course measured accurately. And I'd suggest that it's a good idea for the runners and so on to see how much work was actually involved in getting a course accurately measured and certified. And then there's the second set of slides I sent is a list of measures, and in that it gives you a view of the areas, first of all, that there are that the running races have been divided into. There's the world has been divided into 4 major areas and each one has their own administrator. I'm the administrator for the Americas. That's North America, Central America, South America. The second group you would see on that, or second slide you see, shows the races and countries that are being looked after by Dave Cundy. This is Asia and Oceania. I'll come back to the particular areas later, or particular countries. The third administrator is for French and Spanish-speaking Europe and Africa, and that's Jean-Francois de Salle. And our fourth administrator is for the English-speaking Europe and Africa, and that is Hugh Jones. If you're going to get a course accurately measured and certified, and it's international, you must get it certified by an individual who is an IAAF, primarily World Athletics is the new term, World Athletics / AIMS measure. And we have 2 grades, and a grade A and grade B, doing different amounts of different things, but they all measure, and you can find out who these are online on this second list. Just as I'll deal with the Americas first, which is the one I'm dealing with. It lists the number of are the countries that have measures such as Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Guatemala, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru, Suriname, USA, and Uruguay. So if you're having a race in those areas, you would contact me. If you are having a race in Australia, China, Chinese Taipei, DPR, Korea, Hong Kong, China, India, Japan, Korea, Lebanon, Malaysia, New Zealand, or Thailand, you would contact Dave Cundy. If you're looking, as I said, for the French and Spanish-speaking Europe and Africa, at the countries like Algeria, Belgium, France, Greece, Italy, Morocco, Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, and Turkey. And finally, the English-speaking Europe and Africa is looked after by Hugh Jones. That's countries such as Austria, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Ethiopia, Finland, Germany, and it goes on, Great Britain, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Israel, Kenya, Latvia, Netherlands, and Norway, Poland, Republic of South Africa, Russia, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, and Sweden. Hugh has quite a few different countries to look after. We have 62 countries altogether, and we have a total of about 255 measures. So hopefully you have no problems, but there is a problem if you're not one of those countries I listed, because we do not have measures in every country yet. If you're going to have a race measured, a good idea to think about perhaps having a workshop, a measurement workshop along with that measurement if possible, or at least help somebody locally by getting them getting them a measuring device, and the measuring device could either be a Jones counter. It's a JR Jones counter from available from Mike Wickheiser in Ohio, or there's Phil Cook has the Cook Jones counter in England. But they're the only two areas that you get Jones counters. And that's about all I would have to deal with, unless you want me to go into any further details.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Bernie. Really fantastic. We will share both your lists, and for anyone who's interested, we will be, as we always do, putting a landing page with links to all of the presentations that have been shared tonight. Thank you, Bernie. It's been an early start for you. We'll let you relax, folks. Please, thank you so much for joining us, Bernie. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. Stay with us. We're in the final lap. Only about another 15, 16 minutes to go, and we're going to bring it home with the second last leg. We're going to bring in Brett Clothier, who is the head of the Athletics Integrity Unit. He's going to give us some insights into how it went in 2021 and some planning for 2022. Late night for you, Brett. Thank you for staying up and joining us from Australia. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Chris. Nice to well, I can't see many of you, but nice to be here talking to you all again. Thanks for having us. I'll get straight into it with our presentation. The purpose of me talking to you today is to give you an update on, I guess, a summary of what happened in 21 under the testing and anti-doping program that we ran, and to talk a little bit about 22. I know in September we gave you the insight in what we'll be doing in 22 in terms of the program as well. But the main focus is a recap of 2021. If you can go to the next slide, please. So 2021, in summary, continued where our program from 2020. We in 2020, of course, we had to adjust to the COVID situation, and 2021 was planned to be a continuation of that. We had to adjust a little bit because I can't remember whether it was the second wave or the third wave or the fourth wave earlier in the year, but it was a slower start to the year than we anticipated. But apart from that, we made up a lot of ground in the second half of the year when the races came back on, and there was a very intensive testing period in the second part of the year. If you recall, the essential structure of our testing pool was that we had 40 elite athletes in the primary registered testing pool, and the remainder of the 300 athletes were in a pool where we were going to focus on producing profiles, ABP profile figures for those athletes. The next slide, please. So here are just the basic stats from 2019, 2020, and 21 that just show the testing numbers that were performed. And you can see in 21 we had a higher number of tests and certainly a high number of samples in the out of competition program. The average number of tests on the RTP athletes, and these figures here for the rates include pre-competition and in-competition tests as well were well up in the group for this year compared to the previous year, and the spend on testing was increased as well. But that reflected more competitions, and so the balance of the spend on the program increased towards testing and away from some of our other functions. Next slide, please. This is the test distribution relating to, these are RTP, registered testing pool tests, only the top group. And you can see just how, the flow of tests during the year really ramped up in that September to December period as the competitions came back online. Next slide, please. And this gives you an idea of how we manage the registered testing pool and athlete risk. A big part of what we do, we're not just testing randomly, of course. We put a lot of time into doing risk assessment to make sure what we're doing is targeted. And of the registered testing pool in 21, 64% of the athletes were classified as low risk, going up to 12% at high and 6% at very high risk. And that's based on our intelligence that we have. So this just gives you an idea of how we're viewing the athletes in the pool and how we focus our attention. Next slide, please. It's just a very simple slide. I don't think it will surprise everyone. The focus is really on Kenya and Ethiopia. This is the distribution of the tests. Also, you can see there Uganda, Eritrea, and many of the Bahraini athletes are based in East Africa as well. So much of the pool, so many of the athletes we're concerned with are based in East Africa. And this just, is the obvious confirmation of what you know, but it's affects, it'll come back in some of our slides, particularly our focus on education. Next slide, please. So that's our summary of 21, and obviously you'll have all these slides, so I'm kind of racing through these right now, but you'll get the slides. You can have a closer look at them, and I'm happy to take any questions. To recap, this is from our meeting in September on the 22 testing plans, and this is what we told you we'd be doing. Instead of a testing pool at the top end of 40, we're increasing that to 80 athletes in the main testing pool, who were tested at the same place as the Olympic, registered track and field athletes, the Olympic athletes. Where usually we only have, in the 100 meters, we'll have 10 athletes of each sex in the pool only. But then we have this extended monitoring pool, and just to recall, we're not doing that quite in the same way as the last 2 years. There'll be more flexibility. It won't be a fixed number of athletes. We'll be selecting who are the athletes are in those extended monitoring pool based on their performance and their likely participation in upcoming races. Next slide, please. So that's testing, and moving on to case management. Next slide, please. So again, just a recap of what we did in case management. I won't go through any of these cases, but just the headline is that we had 13 cases that our legal team were active on in road running in 2021, but on this list, but there were actually, in fact, 7 further cases that commenced, but not yet public. So 20 cases that were worked on all up during the year. You see the names and details up there. We can go to the next slide as well, which completes the list of 13. And just a thing to note that in fact, at the start of this year, I think we have a further 6 cases already that have arisen since this list was put together, which just reflects, the increasing number of races that have happened in the second half of last year and first part of this year. So that, I won't go into any detail of that, but that's obviously a bunch of work from our legal team that goes into the program. I've just got a message there that says the full slide isn't showing. Sorry, Chris. Yeah, the screen's sort of cutting off. If we go to the next slide, please. So education. I wanted to run you through this just a little bit. The next slide. So in education in relation to the road running program is really exciting, and I think we've got a great opportunity here because we're really talking about a group that is starved of education and really wants to receive education. And they're like, the athletes and the support personnel we're finding are really like sponges because for a lack of education in the past. So there's real opportunities. There's a real opportunity here to really, create a better environment and a better industry, quite frankly. And we're really leaning into this. So in 21, the whole pandemic has enabled us to focus on online education, of course. And we're really doing this in a big way with the road running. An important element of it is we're doing these sessions not with huge numbers of athletes, but a maximum of 30 in each call so that they're interactive. We do them in Swahili and Amharic to make sure that the language is appropriate. We certainly don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. There's a different approach to Kenyan athletes, a different approach to Ethiopian athletes, and so on. So last year we did 10 different sessions for label athletes, 4 sessions for athlete support personnel. You can see the attendance rate there of 70% attendance to these sessions is that's really high compared to worldwide. So it's very encouraging. And a dropout rate of just 2% is also very, very good. That's the number of people who make it to the end of each call. We find these sessions, whether they're support personnel or athletes, are very popular, and they're going over time all the time because there's lots and lots of questions. They're highly interactive. It's kind of like the athletes having the chance and the support personnel having the chance to do this in their own language really opens things up. So we're really highly encouraged by how it's gone so far. And we've got good, interesting plans for 2022. You can see there, I'll talk about that in a moment, education on demand and the ARU behavioural strategy. So if we go to the next slide, please.
Good morning. A very warm welcome to all of you to this ARU education session dedicated to the International Registered Testing Pool athletes. Today's session will cover 3 main topics. First one would be about ARU, who we are, what we do, and our areas of work.
Nililaحظ hina اللاعب المنكيني ده.
Kama ungependa kufanya na English ama Kiswahili.
今天正式讲座的题目会包括3
con antelación, ya que sabéis con antelación que vuestro vuelo
la compréhension de la présentation qui va être faite aujourd'hui.
Видели последствия вмешательства организации.
非常に私たちの重要な役割であるんです。
I guess I'll start. I have a question in regards to what you discussed with whereabouts.
We have actually learned a lot, and I think this is the only way to go. This is our new normal. I really, but myself, I got a lot of insights as far as topic is concerned. And I want to urge all my colleagues, please, let us focus on this. Let us read more. Let us listen more.
No muchos tenemos el acceso a tener esta información. Por mí está bien así como se hizo.
So bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
Bye.
a video of what the sessions look like. This is also something for you to read in the material. It's just some quotes from the attendees at the sessions that I think really reflect that this has been a really good start to the education program and is cutting through. So we can go to the next slide, please. And there's further comments here. You can see them on the screen. I won't take you through them, and you can read them later. Next slide, please. So this is something that we're launching in 22 for all the label athletes in East Africa. It's an education on demand kind of platform that we're doing through apps like WhatsApp and Telegram, which are sort of popular ways in East Africa for people to connect. So we did a lot of work and research on, the best way to connect with athletes in this area. And we really thought doing a trial of this kind of education on demand was worthwhile. It's really there for athletes to join a group, ask questions, have them answered, basically ask questions when they arise, not waiting for the next education session, have them answered by people we've trained up and engaged to monitor these apps in their own language. So it's a really exciting project. It's a trial. We'll see how it goes. But we really like this idea, and I'll keep you informed. The other part about 22 is we've introduced a new education strategy, which will be fed into all of these sessions we're running. And it's really about behavioural science and how to change behaviours that we need to change, support and encourage behaviours that are the good behaviours. So we're really excited about using this behavioural strategy as part of these label program education sessions. It's going to be obviously part of our broader education efforts as well. Next slide, please. So here are just some concluding comments, and this slide just repeats what I said earlier. We're really encouraged by the fact that the appetite for learning is very, very high. We're really taking a individual specific approach, not a one-size-fits-all approach, to make the education sessions work. You saw a note about, I think on one of the slides mentioned preparatory sessions, and we've noticed that if we need to have sessions in Ethiopia, for example, to make sure everyone's aware of how to connect, how to use Zoom, etc. And if you have that preparatory session, it makes everything then afterwards flow a lot better. That's just one example. We've also found, for example, having education sessions with important elements of the entourage, like family, is just as important as educating the athletes as well. So these are just some of the things we're finding out and we'll continue to expand on, thanks to all your contributions to the label race program. So I think that's the last slide. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions if there's time. I know it's over time. Sorry about some of the technical issues there.
Some technical gremlins there, but I think people could see those slides, and obviously, as you said, we'll be sharing them with everyone, as with all the presentations from the whole session. I think, Alessio, that technical itch meant that we couldn't manage the chat, but I think Alessio has been looking at it. We'll just have a quick look and see if there's anything. I don't think there's anything here. If there are any questions that come up, we'll pick them up afterwards and bring them through to you. But thanks so much. Rest well, and good to see you again.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Brett. Bye-bye. And as we get to the final leg, delighted to welcome for the umpteenth time to these webinars. Great to see Mark Hurst again, bidding manager of World Athletics. Nice to see you, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Chris. I'm good, thanks. Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many people tuned in.
I think you've got sharing there, and hopefully you'll be able to drive it and get the whole screen. There we are. They're coming up there. Over to you, Mark.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, delighted to bring the session home today with a sprint finish, and bring you up to speed with the latest information on World Athletics Series event hosting opportunities. So the World Athletics Series events include 7 of the highest profile global championships in our sport. And the goal is simple: the world's best athletes in iconic places to inspire people on and off the track, field, and road. Before we review the hosting opportunities, I'd like to share a general overview of our new bidding procedure at World Athletics, which is broken into 4 main steps. Step 1 is the official launch. We will communicate the official launch on email to interested parties. Bid guides for all 7 of the World Athletics Series events are available in the Member Federation Resource Center on our website and are updated for each new launch. The same pre-qualification form is used for all of our World Athletics Series events and is also available in the Resource Center. Step 2, the pre-qualification form submission deadline. The pre-qualification form replaces expressions of interest and must be submitted before the pre-qualification form submission deadline indicated in our bidding calendar on the website. And following this, we will share then the bid application forms with all qualified candidates. I will also endeavor to host a bid and risk workshop with each qualified candidate. That brings us to step 3, bid application form submission deadline. The bid application form must be submitted before the submission deadline indicated in the bidding calendar. And following this, we will invite bidders to make a presentation to our council members at a council information session. The bid evaluation panel, which is made up of 3 council members, our competition and events director, and our ethics and compliance officer, will then make a recommendation to council for the future host. Which brings us to finally step 4, the event award, which is rather self-explanatory, but here our council will award the host city of the respective World Athletics Series event, and that'll be followed by an official press announcement. So let's now take a look at the hosting calendar. And for these purposes, I'll just focus on the next major milestones for each event. Council will soon award the next hosts of the World Athletics Cross Country Championships 2024 and 2026 next month, followed by an award of the World Athletics Championships 2025 in July. In January, we recently just launched the bid process for the next 2 editions of the World Athletics Race Walking Team Championships taking place in 2024 and in 2026. And pre-qualification forms for that event are now due for submission by the 1st of May. We anticipate launching the bid process for the next 2 editions of the World Athletics Relays, with pre-qualification forms due for submission by the 1st of June. And we have recently amended the dates for the World Athletics Under 20 2026 Championships and the World Athletics Indoor Championships 2026 to launch these bid processes in April, with pre-qualification forms due for submission by the 1st of July. We also expect to launch the bid process for the World Athletics Road Running Championships 2025 in August this year, with pre-qualification forms due for submission by the 1st of November. So lock those dates in the diaries. Finally, we expect to launch the bid process for the World Athletics Championships 2027 in September, with pre-qualification forms due for submission by the 1st of December. That's all from my side at the moment. If you have any questions on these World Athletics Series events, on the hosting opportunities, please do not hesitate to get in touch. You can reach us on bidding@worldathletics.org, and it's just up on your screen at the moment. And with that, I'm very pleased to hand back over to Chris.
Thanks very much, Mark. Some really exciting dates there and opportunities, and obviously we'll through this platform be helping to bring those together as well. Great to see you again. Thanks so much. And that's pretty much a wrap as we come to the end of this first World Athletics webinar for 2022. Some really great insights, I felt, an amazing panel. A big thank you to our panelists, some early starts and some late finishes there. Thanks to all of you, particularly those that have stayed with us. Before you run away, a very important date for your calendar. Our next World Athletics Web event will be on Thursday, the 7th of April. Thursday, the 7th of April. Mark your diaries. And that will be mid-season updates and check-in. We'll come back to you with more. And when we send all of the recording and all of the presentations, we'll give you more details of that date as well. And then, of course, a big thank you to World Athletics as well, to Alessio, who's curated this and put it together. Wonderful to work with you again, Alessio. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Watch out from the MPW, Mass Participation World Channels. Road Ahead goes out tomorrow, as it does every week. We'll be sharing more details of what's up and coming on that. The next MPW web series, another date for your diary, 31st of March, which is Web 3.0 and the metaverse and what that might mean for mass participation industry in general. Yeah, that's it from me, Chris Robb, signing off, CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. Delighted to have been your host once again. Look forward to seeing you again in April. And of course, if there's anything I can help with in the meantime, contact me directly, chris@massparticipationworld.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn or through the MPW channels. Wonderful to have been here tonight. Go safe, rest well, have a great day, whichever part of the world you might be in. Thanks so much. Good night from here.